Everybody ready? All right, good morning, everybody. First of all, I want to say thank you to all of the community partners who are here, all the organizations who work so hard every day to keep our communities safe, to advocate for our communities, to do the work in our communities on the streets day after day to disrupt cycles of violence, and also to advocate for common sense gun laws. We are so lucky in Connecticut that we have a federal delegation and federal partners that have been national leaders in calling for common sense gun laws and for gun safety. And today, I'm really grateful to Senator Blumenthal for his leadership on trying to make sure that at the federal level, our national law takes the threat of ghost guns seriously. You know, 4 or 5 years ago, when we talked about ghost guns, it seemed to a lot of people like it was an abstract issue, like it was a threat on the horizon. Ghost guns are a threat in our community and in communities across the country every single day. We have seen a growing percentage of the guns that our police take off the streets, ghost guns. Over the last few years, we have seen between 10 and 15% of the illegal guns seized by the Hartford police as ghost guns. And what that means is that they are guns that are specifically designed to evade common sense gun laws and to evade detection. There is no reason for any law-abiding citizen to have a ghost gun. I want to say that again. There is no reason for any law-abiding citizen to have a ghost gun. They exist only to evade detection and to evade the law. Here in Connecticut, because of the leadership of our legislature and our governor, and because of the advocacy of so many organizations throughout our state, we have ghost gun laws that are strong. And this past session, the governor proposed and the legislature passed a provision that would close a gap and close a loophole to make it easier to enforce that prohibition against ghost guns. But so long as we are a country that has not taken serious action on the federal level, we're going to continue to see these ghost guns come across state lines, including through the mail order guns coming into our community. And that's why the proposals that Senator Blumenthal has advanced matter so much. Supporting the work that the ATF has done to try to address the problem of guns that are assembled, ordered in parts and then assembled, to try to make sure that we as a country take a stand against these illegal weapons that are designed to evade the law and evade detection. Ghost guns is a pretty broad term, and I think Senator Blumenthal may speak to this, but it can mean guns that are printed on 3D printers from designs that are downloaded from the internet, and it can also mean guns that are ordered in parts, receivers and other parts that are partially assembled and then sent through the mail, but because of the holes in our federal law, they avoid the requirements that usually apply to federally designated firearms dealers. And so it's really important that we give the ATF the tools and that federal law tighten those holes so that we can try to prevent these illegal weapons from coming into our community and communities across the country. And again, I want to say, this is not an abstract issue. This is not a theoretical threat. These guns are being used in violent crimes in this community, in communities across our state, and in communities across the country. Finally, let me just say, again, this point that no matter how strong our laws are here in Connecticut, so long as there are loopholes in the federal law, and so long as other states don't take the threat of gun violence seriously, we're going to keep seeing those guns come in. About a third of the guns seized in Hartford come from just 5 states. They come from Vermont, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. A third of the guns that show up on our streets, owned illegally, seized by our police, coming from just 5 other states. And I think that highlights why it's so important that the federal government continue to pass common sense gun laws. They build on the progress, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, and a great way to do that would be by passing this bill that Senator Blumenthal has introduced. So, Senator, thank you so much. We're all really grateful for your leadership on this and proud to be standing with you here in Hartford today.
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor. My thanks to the mayor for his leadership. He has been completely steadfast and stalwart in his advocacy for gun violence prevention. I also want to thank the chief for being here. He's been one of the leaders in our state, and I think his presence speaks volumes about why we're here, which is to enable law enforcement to do its job and protect the citizens of Hartford and our state. And I want to thank the citizens who are here. Most important in this group are the advocates, the grassroots activists. And they have been by our side here in Connecticut, down in Washington. They have been tireless. I am so proud to stand with them today. And there are many, many others out there. And most important among them are the survivors, the folks who relive their tragedies every time they come to a press conference like this one, the loss and the grief that they experience when they experience gun violence personally to a family member or a friend. The law that I'm proposing, and I've been joined by my great colleague in this effort, Senator Murphy, is really pretty simple. The purpose is to close a glaring, gaping loophole in the present law. Anybody who buys a gun has to do it from a licensed seller. The gun has a serial number so that it can be traced, and the manufacturer has to be licensed. When it comes to ghost guns, none of it is true. Ghost guns are sold in parts, often in a kit, without serial numbers. They are unserialized and therefore untraceable when they become crime guns. They are sold by manufacturers who are unlicensed. They're unscreened for their integrity. And there are no background checks. None. Zero. No background checks. They can be assembled on a kitchen table. They can be put together with a 3D printer. The frame and the receiver can be sent, mailed separately without serial numbers, and then put together in the backyard or on a kitchen table. But here's the awful, stark truth about ghost guns. They look like a gun, they shoot like a gun, they kill like a gun. They ought to be regulated as guns. When cops find them on the street after a murder, they are untraceable, which means the investigation can't go back to federal records and trace the ownership of the gun to the point where it was used in commission of a crime. Cops face these guns every day on our street. Sometimes they face them from killers when they aim them at cops. Sometimes they see them on the streets after homicides or robberies. But one way or the other, they are a menace. And here is the other awful truth about ghost guns. They are growing exponentially. If you ask me what is the biggest emerging threat in gun violence, it's ghost guns. The number of ghost guns involved in federal apprehensions grew by 1,000% in just a few years recently. 1,000%. And that same trend is mirrored in Hartford, in every major city, in every state, all around the country. Ghost guns are the weapon of choice for professional criminals, street gangs, and extremists because they can't be traced. They're untraceable, unmarked, unlicensed, unregistered, and unserialized. So this legislation basically requires, very simply, anytime a frame or receiver or any kit is sold, the parts have to have serial numbers. Number two, there have to be background checks on the purchaser. Number three, the manufacturer has to be licensed. And anybody who possesses this kind of unserialized and untraceable weapon is violating the law. There is a grace period. We give people a grace period. You want to get rid of it before you're prosecuted? Okay. You get 180 days. Sell it, turn it in at a police headquarters or anywhere else. But the point is, let's get ghost guns off the streets, stop the sale and use of them in commission of a crime. There is no valid purpose for anybody to have a ghost gun except to evade the law or commit a crime. And that's why I am very, very passionately going to work to get bipartisan support. There ought to be no political controversy about a ghost gun ban, with law enforcement behind it, with common sense supporting it, and with gun owners also hopefully supporting it, because anybody using a gun for recreation or hunting or other law-abiding purposes wouldn't be using a ghost gun. They just wouldn't be using an untraceable, unserialized weapon to hunt deer or shoot at a range or other kind of valid law-abiding purpose. And no law-abiding person would want to buy ghost guns. The Hartford police have found and apprehended ghost guns here in growing numbers, and I know that they are concerned about it, and that's the reason I am so grateful to be here with the chief and to thank the men and women of the Hartford Police Department, our state police, and police across the country. This measure, in my view, supports law enforcement. This is a pro-policing measure, pro-law enforcement. And my hope is that their support will help us carry the day in Washington. Chief, I'm so grateful to you for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Blumenthal, for his advocacy at the federal level, and thank Mayor Bronin for his advocacy at the state level. The reality here is that when we're dealing with ghost guns, there's not a lawful purpose. That's repeating what both Mayor Bronin and Senator Blumenthal had to say, but these are not otherwise law-abiding citizens that we're taking these guns away from. These are people with malicious intent. These are our violent criminals. That's where we're getting these guns. And in 2020, only 3%, 2.7% of the firearms that we seized were ghost guns. Last year, it was 16%. 58 firearms we took, ghost guns we took off the streets last year, and those numbers are growing every year. As an investigative tool, as Senator Blumenthal indicated, we have to be able to trace these firearms when they're used in a crime, when we find them in places they don't belong, when they're used to do things that you shouldn't do with a firearm. That tracing, that national tracing, is what helps us close some of these cases and find out who's supplying illegal guns to people that will do violent acts in the city. It's a huge investigative tool for us that we lose when you're talking about a ghost gun. These ghost guns are also not safe. They're easily manipulated. They're a manufactured product that doesn't have the same scrutiny as a gun, that is serialized and legally purchased. They can be dangerous to the person that's firing them, but they're more importantly dangerous to the community and dangerous to the officers. These guns are easily manipulated into fully automatic weapons, and this is a tool that we need not just here in Connecticut. We have stronger tools here in Connecticut than you see in many other states, thanks to our legislature, our governor, and our mayor. But these guns are coming in from outside of Connecticut, and we work very closely with the ATF, with the DEA, with the FBI on these investigations. That regulation is key for us to be able to stop the flow of these guns that we can't trace. They are one of our most significant dangers right now that we're dealing with when it comes to gun violence. The individuals that we are taking these guns off of are some of our most violent individuals. They are convicted felons that can't get guns in other ways, so they get them in this way. They are violent offenders that have been previously convicted of violent acts that are getting these guns through these loopholes in ways that you wouldn't be able to, or at least it would be a lot harder to get a regular registered firearm. So I appreciate the support by both our federal delegation and our state delegation to help us keep the community safe by getting rid of these ghost guns. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I'd like to introduce now a great community advocate here on behalf of an organization that does wonderful work, Eddie Brown. Thank you.
All right, Eddie Brown.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Eddie Brown, the director of the Greater Hartford Youth Leadership Academy at Hartford Communities That Care. HCTC is focused on prevention, how youth leadership development, community violence intervention programs, and local, statewide, and national collaboration on best practices can support families in many ways that save lives. In Hartford alone, the number of ghost guns seized tripled from 2020 to 2021, and then nearly tripled again last year. We often point to the cradle to prison pipeline and analyzing where our society needs to make some course corrections. But there's also another pipeline, the iron pipeline, through which weapons flow illegally from states with weak gun safety laws and challenge local communities even more. In their past 5 annual Raising Youth Voices Regional Youth Summits, our youth leaders at HCTC have looked at many root causes and local conditions related to gun violence. They've made recommendations for alleviating poverty, equalizing education, and preventing violence and trauma. Attention does tend to focus on the issues of gun violence when catastrophic events befall our communities, but history tells us that support for preventing and reducing violence comes in fits and starts, and it's not sustained. These are complicated problems, not curable with sound bites. It's what happens when the cameras go away, that's what really matters. For example, one of HCTC's trained violence prevention professionals, Tyrone Bynum, he took a deeper look at these issues in his August 1st CT Mirror article, which is titled, "Absent Parents Are Hurting Inner City Youth in Our Communities." As Tyrone took the time that we all should take to really consider what happens upstream before violent incidents occur. HCTC, again, is all about prevention, proactively dealing with these issues before violence escalates. Halting the flow of illegal weapons, ghost guns as a black market purchases coming through the iron pipeline is one preventive strategy we can all support. We should actually be asking, why do widely supported common sense gun safety measures stall behind so many roadblocks in Congress? However, in Connecticut, we're fortunate to be here today, and our entire congressional delegation, Senator Blumenthal and his team, are steadfast leaders who believe in common sense gun safety legislation like the Ghost Guns and Untraceable Firearms Act we're endorsing here today. And again, let's continue to fight this good fight, because there's no time to lessen our efforts at preventing and reducing gun violence. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Brother Kyle from the Brother Kyle Institute at the YMCA, and you're absolutely right. There needs to be a collective effort. Talking to a lot of state workers, I had a case come to me this morning discussing the DCF case of a young man coming out. And this young man is very dangerous. And they asked me, well, can you find him a place? And my question to them, can you find him a place? Because he cannot come back to the community. If he comes back to the community, either he's going to die or someone's going to die in the street. So where are you going to put him? Well, they want to release him. Well, is he ready to be released? Because there's a lot of mental issues going around. We've been working with him for years, so we know what his status is. So the question is, you're going to let him out, and he's going to get hold of a ghost gun or any kind of gun. The community's in shame. I said, what are you going to do? They said, well, we got to drop him off at the block. Well, where's he going to stay? He's going to stay in somebody's hallway. Who he's going to hook up with? He's going to hook up with the gang that's on the block. Whoever's selling the drugs. Whoever got the gun, he's going to get a hold to it. Well, where do you think we should put him, Brother Kyle? I said, send him to Alaska. And that way we don't have to worry about him coming to Hartford. Because he have no place to go. His family don't want him. His cousin don't want him. His uncles don't want him. And you're going to send him out here? And he knows no one cares about him? That's a dangerous individual. So when you hear things in the street, you better believe it. So-and-so's coming out. How do we keep him in so he don't come out? He's sending signals about what he's going to do when he hit the block. We're right in the neighborhood. We're right in the thick of it. We're talking to young people. That's what interrupters do. That's what we train them to do. Get the information, and what do we do about it? In order to do anything about it, we have to work collectively. We got to make sure that certain people, for whatever reason, is not ready to come out yet. How do you know it? Because you hear the chatter in the street. So yeah, I support this effort 150%. But also we got to look at who's coming out. Because if the gun's out there, who's using? Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to put an exclamation mark behind that point. You know, this ban on ghost guns is not the only solution that we need. We need to invest in community outreach, the interrupters, the peacemakers, and the community groups that are so important to outreach and are such important sources of reaching youth. And thank you for that comment, and thank you, Eddie. Very important point. You know, as he said, we have strong laws here in Connecticut, but guess what? Guns really have no respect for state boundaries. You know, they cross state lines even more easily when they are shipped in the mail than through the iron pipeline. The iron pipeline consists of somebody throwing a bunch of guns in the trunk of a car and then having to sell them on the street where they can be apprehended. If they're sold in parts through the mail, nobody sees them. They can't be stopped. They're in a box. Unless we have federal law to require that there be serial numbers on them, that the manufacturer be licensed, that there be background checks, and a prohibition on possession. Anybody else? Any questions?
Well, Dick, you've got the divided Senate and House down there. What kind of rabbit can you pull out of your hat this year?
Well, nobody gave us much of a chance last year before the bipartisan, and I emphasize bipartisan, Safer Communities Act. And then it happened. I think the two most likely candidates for passage this year are safe storage, Ethan's Law at the federal level, and a ban on ghost guns, and maybe tightening the whole background check system. Those are three very common sense, should be non-controversial measures, and we'll just have to hope for all the stars being in alignment and bipartisan support. But I think we have to continue this fight, even though the odds are against us. They are against us any year on gun violence prevention, as long as we need 60 votes in the United States Senate.
Are you seeing support so far from your colleagues in Congress on either side of the aisle?
I see support on both sides of the aisle for the idea of banning ghost guns. And the reason is quite simply that every state is at the mercy of unserialized and untraceable weapons. And my colleagues are hearing from their police forces, from their community leaders, from their gun owners, that these kinds of weapons are the firearms of choice for professional criminals, extremists, and street gangs, among others. But there's no valid law enforcement reason anyone should have them. There's no law-abiding hunter or recreationalist who will defend unlicensed and untraceable weapons. So I'm hopeful, I never say optimistic, but hopeful that we will have bipartisan support.
Sure, you know, we've talked a number of times over the past few days about what we saw this past weekend, but let me just step back. I think everybody who does this work, everybody who wants safer communities, knows that you have to focus on both prevention and on accountability. And you see a lot of people up here who give themselves to that prevention work. You know, as Brother Carl spoke, that prevention work includes partnerships with violence interrupters who are helping to break the cycle of violence, to identify disputes and de-escalate them. It includes initiatives like our citywide hospital-based violence intervention to make sure that those who are victims of violence are treated not just for their physical wounds, but for their mental, emotional wounds as well, to help break the cycle of violence. It includes the direct individualized support to those who are most involved in making sure that we're helping them find the path to a different kind of life. It also includes things like our Reentry Welcome Center. It includes things like our Youth Service Corps to create pathways to opportunity. We take that work of prevention, which includes both immediate de-escalation, also getting at the deeper root causes of violence, really seriously. But I think everybody who does that work, again, I want to say, knows that you need both prevention and accountability. And as we saw this past weekend, there are people out in our community who should not be out in our community. There are people who have been repeatedly involved in violence, repeatedly inflicted violence on this community. They've taken lives. They've tried to take lives. They've traumatized the community again and again and again. And that's not fair to this community or any other community. You know, I think that what we're here today to talk about is an element of the prevention work. It's an element of trying to keep illegal, untraceable guns out of the hands who plan to use them for violence in our community. And it's also tied to the accountability work, because when we find somebody who is out in our community with a ghost gun, we need to make sure that we've got the legal tools to hold that person accountable. And to do that, we need not just the state laws that are in place, but we need federal action. We need federal laws. So again, I want to come back to that pairing of both prevention and accountability. I think the people who are standing up here today, and many others, will tell you that as a community, as a city, we're doing more than we've ever done to try to interrupt those cycles of violence. And we need to continue to do that work, and we need to make sure that the resources for supporting that work are sustained, so that that work doesn't pause or fall apart because funding goes away. That work needs to be sustained, it needs to be funded over the long term. And at the same time, we need to make sure that the legal tools are in place to hold those people accountable who are repeatedly involved in violence in this community or any other community.
Would you like to say something?
Thank you. My name is Reverend Henry Brown, Mothers United Against Violence. I 150%, like Brother Carl, support this effort. These guns has no business on our street. It's affecting our youth growth. Our kids are finding access to these guns, and that's unacceptable. I mean, you know, this has been going on for so long, and we need it to stop. Just like the mayor said, these people, individuals, don't belong in the streets. The ones that have these guns, people that are making the guns, I wish that there was some way that we could put them in jail, because they should know better than having these guns coming into the inner city anyway. It's the inner city youth that these guns are impacting. Inner city youth. These guns have been sold on our streets daily, and we need to find a way to stop it. So, Senator Blumenthal, Senator Murphy, the mayor, the chief, I support you 100%, because we have to do better. But just like Brother Carr said, it's an effort that we all have to unite on. We can't be separated on this thing. We all have to work together to find a solution. So I strongly support this bill, and I strongly support our police department, the things that they do. I deal with families that have been impacted by violence every day, and I'm going to tell you, if it weren't for the police department, I don't know where we'll be. I don't know where we'll be. And some of these families want me to say, tell the detectives, thank them for the work that they're doing. They're doing tireless work, trying to solve these homicides. So I just want to give a kudos to the police department and thank them for their efforts. But please, let's support this bill and get these ghost guns out of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Brown. The name of the bill is, again, the Ghost Gun and Untraceable Firearms Act. It has already 10 co-sponsors. We're expecting there will be more by the time we come back from our recess. So far, they're all Democrats, but we are hoping to make it bipartisan.
Do you know how many instances this year these ghost guns have been used in crimes? Is there a number for that?
So this year is running about parallel with last year. Like I said, last year we were at about 16%. I think so far this year we're a little low. We're at like about 14%. But as far as them used in individual crimes, I don't have that stat. But you can watch the progression. I mean, just 2.5 years ago in 2020, we were only at 3. So they're more prevalent now. We are getting more guns off the street in general as well, and that's due to a lot of the efforts of the people standing up here and the police department. Our focus is on prevention, right? And when a violent act does happen, our focus then turns to solving that crime and bringing people to justice. But the focus is on prevention, and we've just got to be able to get these guns so they're not coming in the way that they're coming in. It's just too easy.
Another question for you, Chief. You guys mentioned that a number of these guns have been apprehended by over the past few years, but you also mentioned that it's kind of untraceable, making investigations a lot harder. How do you guys make get these guns on the street?
So the guns that we're talking about, last year in 2022, there were 58 of them total. That accounted for 16%. We do know other states have seen as much as 20 and 25% of their guns being ghost guns. But these are guns that are taken off of criminals. They're people that we apprehended, search warrants for firearms, narcotics, other illegal activity where these guns are seized, individuals that commit a crime, that do a shooting, guns that we recover that way. So we're not recovering them, as Senator Blumenthal alluded to, because they're coming in through the mail. We don't have any way to intercept them on the way in. We're catching them once somebody is criminally possessing them and doing something wrong with them, whether it's violence or whether it's something else. But that's how we're getting those guns. We're not able to interrupt their coming into the state right now. Hopefully this legislation will change that.
All set? Thank you all. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Maybe something, the post office, legislation and post office, detective.